Good everybody. Good day, everybody around the world. This is another episode of Digital Ag Global. I'm Clyde Graham, your co-host for the podcast today. I'm with a consulting company called Keystone Solutions, and we're here to explore what's happening in the digital agriculture space. Today, we're going to be focusing on success and how to avoid failure in the digital ag space, particularly for young or emerging entrepreneurs and startups in the field. We'll introduce our guests in a few minutes, but we're really trying to look at today at what are the hallmarks of success and some of the red flags of failure that people can try and avoid. We know our audience includes a lot of people that are either looking at starting up, funding startups, or engaged in a startup that's trying to move to that next stage in the business cycle. And so we're hoping that you will find some interesting information in the podcast today that you can use. We're also going to be interactive in that we have a chat. If you have questions, if you have comments, we'd really appreciate you sharing those in the chat, and we'll try and address all of them during the session today. So first of all, I'd like to turn it over to my co-host, Yurii Kovalchuk, the CEO at Cultivate, for a few opening comments.
Thank you, Clyde. Hi, guys. As usual, Yurii Kovalchuk with you, CEO and co-founder of Cultivate. At Cultivate, we are creating digital solutions for agri-food space. So if you're building your MVP or you're trying to digitize operations of your organization, feel free to drop us a line. And as Clyde mentioned today, we're going to talk about do's and don'ts for AgTech startups in 2025. During our previous episode with Jack Ellis from Cleantech Group, we discussed an overall situation with innovations for agri-food sector, and we discussed a lot of challenges the industry is facing. So today we're going to expand. In a sense, we're going to talk about what are the best practices to use, what to avoid for AgTech startups in 2025. Before we introduce our guest today, I just want to remind everyone that Digital Ag Global as a podcast have open partnership opportunities. So if you want to become a part of our network, have access to the insights, our audience, and speakers opportunities, feel free to drop us a line, and we will sort you out. With this said, let's start introducing our guest, Clyde.
Sure. So let's turn to Susanne Cork, director of the Ottawa Innovation Farm at Area X.O in Ottawa, where I'm located as well. We're going to have a very Ottawa-centric program today, which is appropriate because even though Ottawa is the nation's capital, about 1 million people, a huge part of the city is actually either agricultural land or natural setting. So it is actually an appropriate place to have this. So Susanne, maybe you could talk a little bit about the role that Ottawa Innovation Farm has in fostering startups in the AgTech sector.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Clyde and Yurii, for the opportunity to be here today. So my name is Susanne Cork, as Clyde mentioned, and I'm responsible for the Innovation Farm program at Area X.O. So I'll just step back a little bit and tell you sort of what Area X.O is, and then I'll situate for you how the Smart Farm or the Innovation Farm fits into that program. So Area X.O is a test and demonstration facility, a fully private test and demonstration facility. We're behind a locked gate. We occupy about 190 acres on the former Greenbelt Research Farm, which was originally established by Agriculture Canada. We have the privilege of being situated right in the middle of the city, so easy access for both innovators and regulators and stakeholders and all of that sort of thing. Within the facility, we support a number of different industries with respect to technology development. And so we included the Innovation Farm program into an already flourishing autonomous vehicle program, a transportation program, one focused on robotics for defense and public safety and that sort of thing, simply because it was very obvious that we were sitting on a farm setting, and of course, AgTech and the digitization of technologies in the agricultural sector is such a growing space and so important, as Clyde said, to the economy within our region. So we are owned and operated by Invest Ottawa, which is the economic development agency for our region. So the role of the Innovation Farm is very much to support entrepreneurs that are developing new technologies, building businesses, and growing businesses in our region, giving them places where they can safely test and demonstrate their technologies and access the stakeholders and the audience that they're looking for in order to help them grow and flourish. So that's really the purpose of the program, is to provide whatever resources that we're able to make available, whether those are technology resources from a network perspective, fields, so on and so forth, and to give everybody a really good head start into their innovation and entrepreneurship journey.
In this space, I think everybody could use a bit of a head start. So,
yeah.
Because it can be challenging. And I think, thanks, Susanne, for recommending John Fielding to join us today, the president and CEO of Nanobubble Control Systems. And that's a great corporate name. I find that fascinating. John, maybe you can talk a little bit about your journey in this space, and what were some of the challenges you faced, and how did you overcome them in getting your company rolling and succeeding?
Sure, that would be great. So thank you for having me, Yurii and Clyde, and thanks, Susanne, for asking me to join you today. I'm really happy to be here. So you mentioned my name, Nanobubble Control Systems. I call that my COVID name, which is when I started my company. And not sure my head was quite straight when I decided on that name, but hey, it is what it is. So, I started this, as I mentioned at the beginning of COVID. I started my company, and based on some technology that was emerging from Japan, and nanobubble technology, and it has lots of uses, but it's a relatively new technology in the past 10 years, and it's kind of a technology that's searching for a home right now, because it can be used in many applications. And so the area where I'm focusing in on is agriculture. And I kind of have two branches. One is focusing in on standard growing agriculture, and I've actually got experiments, and I'm actually hosted at Area X.O. And I'm focusing in on agriculture, where I can increase plant growth using nanobubbles and oxygen. But I also have a focus on transforming biosecurity for farms. So focused in on helping improve the health of animals, and as well use a disinfectant in trying to control biosecurity measures for farms. So that's kind of a little background of the company itself. And I kind of, you said what my journey about this. I mean, I think. And I do take exception. You say young entrepreneurs, because I don't really qualify as a young entrepreneur anymore. Young at heart, maybe, but
yeah. Young is relative, John.
It's relative. Yeah. It's relative. So, yeah. So I mean, the interesting thing with entrepreneurship is one, it's a lot of work, right? And you have to recognize that it's a lot of work, and that's no matter what type of entrepreneurship you're in, whether it's coding or whatever, it's a lot of work. I would hazard to say that entrepreneurship in the ag space, it has quite unique challenges that are somewhat hard to get over, and that is very geographically different as well. But I think for myself, one of the key things and the key takeaways, and you'll hear me refer back to this, is you have to learn to fail fast and start over and pivot, right, as a company. And I have personally pivoted my marketplace in the 4 short years that I've been doing this. I've pivoted my marketplace probably 5 times, where I go in and I try a market, doesn't quite work out. So I'm going to leave that as a high level little tip for companies is learn to fail fast and move forward again fast. Yeah.
Well, these days everyone seems young to me, John. So there. So I think it's interesting that you're involved in what I would kind of call this the phytosanitary kind of area of AgTech, and I just look at the headlines these days about the ostrich farm in British Columbia that's facing an order from CFIA to kill the flock of ostriches, which is got tremendous North American attention, and just how critically important these kinds of issues are. So I think you're in an area that has a lot of potential. One thing I tend to hear is that a lot of people, when they're starting their companies, they're very excited about the idea, the technology that they're coming forward to, and that's the fun part. But there's a lot of things that aren't so fun when you're starting a company. You've got to deal with your intellectual property issues, business planning, accounting, all the stuff that really doesn't get people so excited. So from that perspective, maybe you start with you, Susanne. I mean, what do you see as the issues that people have to deal with in terms of making good decisions about their company and how to make it a success?
So, you're very right, Clyde, with respect to, what brings an entrepreneur to develop their company in the first place. As you say, often it is like the deep passion for the technology that they're developing. But in order to run a successful business, all those other sort of more mundane yet extremely important sort of housekeeping things are required. So, understanding, let's say you get some investment, how you manage that cash flow, how you allocate your resources so that you can continue to go and do the things that John mentioned about, pivoting quickly, having the financial resources to continue through some of that. And we've seen it all at the Innovation Farm. We've seen people struggle with a variety of different things. We benefit within the AreaX.0 program, where we're sort of very field and technology focused, to have the entire Invest Ottawa capability, wrapped around it. So the whole programming around economic development, the mentors and the advisors that can provide guidance to the innovators on things like HR, hiring the right people, knowing who to hire, knowing when to hire, all of those sorts of things, running your finances, keeping on top of all of those sorts of things. So we really kind of have two perspectives on it, and we have the mentorship and the guidance that can support you on the business side. But then if we look more on the entrepreneurship side, one of the things that I would say, and I think John would probably concur with it, you really need to understand the problem that you're trying to solve. So you really need to zero in on what your value proposition is and what problem exactly it is that you're trying to solve. How big a problem is it actually? And who cares about that problem? So, to your earlier point, Clyde, really understanding who your audience is, like who are you going to be selling this to? And then as well, sort of on the other side of that, how big a change are you going to ask your audience or your clients to make in how they do things today? Is it a quantum shift? Is it some type of technology that's going to just move the needle a little bit, but, pay off, a lot? Like, where exactly do you fit on that? And having a really solid understanding of what that is, I think, is really important, because it really it changes how you communicate with your audience and how you set yourself up for success. And then the one last thing that I would mention, just in terms of some things that sometimes completely derail an organization, is really understanding the regulatory framework that's at play as well. We've had a number of instances where not being well prepared for the long journey that is the regulatory process. And as we all know, anything to do with regulatory things is a long process, and not having the resources to carry you all the way through, and potentially having to pivot because something didn't go the way that you had hoped on the regulatory side, and then needing to make a shift in your technology or the approach that you're taking in order to meet the regulatory requirements. So I would say that that's kind of the area that I think is really important for the innovator to focus on.
Yeah. And John, so what's your experience in that? I mean, was it everything you thought that every day would be, 12 hours of just fun and excitement when you started your company?
So no. So I'm going to build a little bit on what Susanne said here, right? And she took my next 2 points, right? Is one is understand the problem, right? What happens is that entrepreneurs tend to get married to their tech, right? And it's shiny, it's exciting, and whatever, and they really don't understand what problem they're trying to solve, right? So that was a great point, right? And you need to do that, right? And then I resonate with you. You need to figure out how big of a problem it is, right? But the next most important thing is to actually validate that problem with the end customer, right? And that you can chat GPT, or you can do all this analysis, and it looks so beautiful on paper, and with Claude AI you get these beautiful statements and everything. But if you don't actually go and talk to your customer, talk to the farmer, and actually understand if it is a real problem for them, right? And I alluded to some of the challenges in the ag space, is that often, depending on what you're offering to them, often they are in a mindset that they're doing the best that they can. And sometimes what you have to offer is a little bit off to the side. And so it's going to be hard to get them onto the page, that understanding that you can actually solve a problem for them, right? So I think getting out and engaging with the customer and validating that problem is really, really important, right? In a couple of my pivots, even though I know this, and I've told myself these same things and listened to many people tell me, yeah, you need to really understand the problem. My first 3 pivots is I really didn't understand the magnitude of the problem, right? And I thought it was a great problem I was solving, but what it turned out really wasn't an issue for them, right? And that's what forced me to pivot, right? So I think those are the keys, is figuring out what the problem is. Is it a real problem? Is it just something that is a small fix, or is this actually going to be transformational, right? And then it's actually engaging and validating in person with your clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something entrepreneurs don't do enough of, is actually really talking to, because your friends can think it's a great idea, and some of your mentors can think it's a great idea, but until you actually talk to someone who's living it, it's going to be, you're going to get a rude awakening. I mean, so just to build on that, an actual an actual occurrence I had. So you mentioned the ostrich farms, right? So I'm targeting, my main target focus is on poultry, right? So anything that's grown, whether it be chickens or ducks or ostriches or whatever. And one of my aspects is actually building the health of animals, and the other one is for disinfectant. And so I actually was talking to a particular farmer, and his response is, I don't have a disinfection problem, right? I'm all good. My yields are good. I know in reality that he does, right? But in his mindset, he doesn't, right? So now my focus is trying to educate, which is a tough word to say in front of customers, is you need to educate them a little bit on, okay, you actually do have a problem, and this is how I can improve it, right? So customer engagement is key, and that's sometimes really hard to get people's attention to go that way.
All right. Well, and it's hard to educate people without kind of, insulting them to some extent too, right? I mean,
Exactly.
yeah. So that is a tough line to walk. Yurii, when you're dealing with tech startups and you're providing them with software development services, what are the issues that you see with entrepreneurs?
100%. I want to agree with Susanne and John. You need to find the actual problem that worth solving, because even if the problem is there and it's a real life problem, there are cases when it shouldn't be solved because it doesn't make a lot of business sense. So someone should be willing to pay for your product. So this problem can be commercialized in a way. And as John mentioned, a lot of startup founders, they are super focused on a tech, on the innovation itself, rather than the actual use case for it. So being able to commercialize the innovations, that very, very big part of a success for any startup. But in ag world or agri-food world, it's even a bigger challenge because as we just discussed, user adoption is low. You need to take your time. You need to educate your customer, etc., etc. So even if you have an actual solution for a problem, and problem can be solved and should be solved because it's going to be a better ROI, etc., it doesn't mean it's going to be commercially successful. And having it commercially successful, that for a lot of founders, somewhere down the line after a seed round, but you cannot raise seed round because you haven't proved. You haven't had any paid clients yet, and that's the big problem for venture capital, for example. But another thing that we've seen in some founders, they are so focused on the technology and innovation itself, so they are trying to kind of over-engineer it before it needs to be done. So we will add this and that. We will add the feature, we will integrate AI into it, blah, 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 all that, but it doesn't have any value to a client. So focus on the core features, on features that brings value, and actually have someone pay for them. That's kind of a silver lining of all of that.
Yeah. I think one of the difficulties in the Canadian ag sector is that by and large, most farms tend to be fairly successful already, and you're not, saving them from imminent doom, but you're trying to make them incrementally more successful or fun to operate or all those things. And so it's sometimes the proposition you're putting forward isn't as crystal clear as it might be if you're selling them a get out of jail free card sort of thing. So we've kind of talked, I think, a little bit about the negative aspects. But Susanne, when somebody walks in the door, and I don't know if people walk in with a widget or, it's a portfolio or a concept paper or whatever it is, what are the characteristics of that founder or entrepreneur coming in the door that give you a lot of confidence that they're actually going to succeed?
So a few things, and I don't think that there's like a magic sort of perfect entrepreneur, but I definitely, for me, it comes down to the humility to be able to do what John talked about, truly be able to listen, not to believe that you have solved, the Cadbury secret. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, you need something.
How to get the caramel
out of the caramel bar. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that was something that just aged me, but nevertheless, that used to be a problem. So, you have to have some measure of humility. You clearly need some tenacity. So I look for those two things, and they're not diametrically opposed. I think, having the tenacity, couched in the humility, your ability to listen, your ability to be humble about, with your audience. Because the one thing that I found, as I'm watching some of the innovators interact with the audiences that we bring in for the various things, farmers, it's a tradition-based industry. It's a heritage-based industry. In many respects, they're, generationally been farming, and they know their farms, they know their land, they know their business in a way that you could never know it. And what you're looking at doing is introducing something to them that in some way you believe could improve things, improve sustainability, whether it's from an environmental stewardship perspective, a plant health, a soil health, or from a profitability perspective, or hopefully both of those two things together. So I think, having some tenacity and resilience, because you may need to pivot, you may need to change. So those things are characteristics that I really look for when we're talking to folks. We will have folks that will come in on our website with a great idea, and that's kind of how the workflow happens for us. Folks will sort of pop an idea onto the website, which will flow into our lead funnel, and we'll arrange for a discovery call with that innovator to better understand what it is that they're looking for, from us. How can we support them? What type of resources would be helpful to help them move along? And then, we'll make an assessment on, do we have the right things? Is this the right place? But then we'll really listen for their ability to, are they going to be humble enough to hear what the audience is going to say? Are they going to be tenacious enough to keep going when things get difficult? And it inevitably always gets difficult. We try to set up a 3-year project for the most part, because we know that adoption is not a simple process. And we know that, the innovator will need to be at it for at least 3 years with a project on our Innovation Farm program, if they're going to be successful. Year over year, the weather's different. Year over year, you iron out the bugs on the technology. The first year is typically a demonstration year. We're getting to know each other. We're getting to understand their technology, helping them zero in on who the right audience is to bring in for demonstrations, what's the stakeholder ecosystem they need to be exposed to kind of sort out some of the other things, all of those sorts of things. And then you move on into proving, and proving again, because 1 year of success doesn't mean anything. You need to prove it. You have a wet year, a dry year, a really crappy weather year, a great one. You really need to demonstrate that it's going to work year over year. So that's really where the tenacity and the resilience comes in. Are you in it for the long haul, or are you looking for me just to bring as many clients as we can possibly fit into a room and give you kind of a pitch opportunity? Because if that's what it is, it's ultimately not going to get off the ground.
Yeah, interesting. So, John, I'm going to ask you not to be humble and maybe talk about, what do you think were some of the things that gave you an edge in the early days of getting your company rolling? I think we lost your audio there, John.
I think you're on mute, John.
There we go. I'm back. Sorry.
Okay.
You don't want to miss anything.
So there's a couple things, right? One is finding a place where you can take advantage of the networking system around you, right? So, I can't, and I'm not trying to butter up to Susanne here for anything, but I was finding it very difficult to find a place where I could go and test out my tech, right? There's lots of rooms with computer screens in them, right? There's lots of little drop-in spaces where you can have meetings, right? But in AgTech, you need a place where you can put a shovel in the ground, where you can, my technology is focused a lot around water. Well, I needed a sink and a drain, and it was going to splash all over the place, and it was going, I needed a place where I could muck around, right? So I was just delighted when I got into Area XO, because I found an environment that was going to be able to help me, right? And the other thing for entrepreneurs that that gave me the edge, right, is you want to find a way where you can network in the right places, right? And it's easy to network, and networking is super important, right? But it's networking with the right people. And here again, this was enabled a lot by Area X.0, is it allowed me to sit and listen to some influencers, right? So in Canada, there's Farm Credit Canada. There are multiple associations that Susanne has brought into the farm that I would have never been able to get in front of beforehand, right? A one-person company working out of their garage just would not get that sort of attention, right? So I think it's really important, and was very beneficial to me to kind of be in this environment where I can network properly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think. And I think as well as just talking to a lot of people. There's in the Ottawa region where we've been blessed with a lot of startups, and a lot of them are not in my space, right? But they're startups nonetheless, right? And so there is an ecosystem of people that you can just go and talk to and talk about your company, right? Because if you sit and try and figure it out at your desk,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to get anywhere. So the edge for me has been in an environment like Ottawa where I can actually just talk to a lot of people, right? And bounce my ideas off of without having to be in the confines of a pitch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you're nervous about investors. As I can go and talk to angel investors, and I'm not pitching to them. I'm just going, hey, do you think this is a good idea, right? And I think that's been very positive for me, is just finding that environment that I could do multiple aspects of my business in.
But I find that's an interesting point, John. I'll come back to you in a second. But, I think people have proprietary technology, and I think sometimes they're afraid of talking about it too much or sharing information for fear of giving up their patent or copyright or whatever they have. How do you collaborate and network and all that stuff without giving away the farm, so to speak?
Yeah, that is a paralysis point for a lot of companies, right? Um, and I guess my thought around that is, if you don't talk to people, it just is not going to happen. So you have to figure out that point where you're not necessarily giving away your secret sauce, right? But you're really focusing in on a problem. And I struggled with this at the beginning because I use a technology called nanobubbles, right? And people kind of have no idea what nanobubbles is, and they kind of, and so I end up diving into the technology and whatever, and I get totally, which is where my my IP is going to be around, and everybody glazes over, right? And I'm kind of going, well, there's really small bubbles, and you can treat, yeah, and so I don't do that anymore, right? I mean, I just kind of stay at the focusing on the problem, focusing on the solution, and if someone wants to talk tech, well, then I'll go and sign an NDA with them and get into the tech. But back yourself out so you're actually focusing in on your customer and your client, and your solution for the client, right? And that's really what your business is about.
Okay, well that's cool.
Well,
Yurii, do you want to fill in here?
yeah, I want to comment on something John said, like being afraid of sharing your secrets, your IP, your copyrights. Sharing the overview of technology doesn't mean it's gonna get copied. It's just a lot of kind of fear in startup founders that someone gonna steal their technology or their idea. But what I've seen so far, even if your competition know what you're gonna build, actually build it and sell it to someone. That's the real task. That it's not that easy, you know. So sharing the technology itself can be very useful for people to understand the value you bring to the table, and it's not necessarily means someone gonna steal it, because you can have 10, 20 good ideas, but actually bring them to life, that's the actual challenge. So yeah, it's just a point to the power of networking, sharing ideas can put you in front of the right people and help you find what you're looking for, either customers or funding or whatever it is.
Yeah, Susanne, so how important is execution versus innovation?
You know, the proof is always in the pudding. The execution is kind of where everything happens. So the innovation, I think, is extremely important in the sense that you have to be looking to improve something, to make something better, to solve a problem. I mean, that's really on the innovative side. And sometimes the innovations are transformational, and other times you're making incremental adjustments. But the actual execution of it, which is where I think, you know, some of the work that we do and facilitate at the Innovation Farm becomes important, and why we look at these multi-year engagements with our innovators, you know, to prove that you can continue to execute, you can scale. Like, we have some examples on both sides of that. So we were working with an innovator that had a great technology, and it appeared as though it was, it was revolutionary. The challenge that they faced was in the execution. It was really difficult. And, you know, when it was being done in kind of a test or a lab environment where there was lots of control and lots of folks focusing on it, it worked beautifully, and it has a lot of merit across a variety of different contexts. From a sustainability perspective, it was, you know, good for the soil, it was good for the plant, you know, produced a great outcome. But from an execution perspective, it was really, really hard to do, and it did not scale well. So, you know, you were doing something, let's say, with a 4-row planter, but when you got into a 20-row planter, the technology didn't scale without a lot of money, like a lot of money. So suddenly you were pushing yourself out of a price point that was going to be reasonable. And so consequently, I think, you know, the execution component, being able to demonstrate that your technology works in the context within which you're proposing it to work, I think becomes extremely important. And being able to prove it out in different circumstances and in different cases. Not everyone grows corn, not everyone grows soybeans. Some people, you know, obviously in a plant rotation, you're growing, you know, the crop rotation year over year. If something only works with one crop, does not work with another, then you got to ask yourself, okay, how practical is this? So really getting into the execution of it and the demonstration of the technology, whatever it happens to be. And we've had the same thing. Like, so we've had lots of work that we've done with the University of Ottawa, gathering some of the data that we gather from the different sensors and capabilities we have on site, and developing, you know, predictive analytics. Then you run into the challenge of, okay, so is the predictor really telling me something I didn't inherently already know? And especially for heritage farmers that have been doing something for a really long time, they have an instinct about, you know, how things are going to be, how their land reacts, how their plants react, all of those sorts of things. So, you know, where's the AI in terms of producing really insightful things that they didn't inherently already know? There's so many different dimensions to this. The execution and the proving of it in a multitude of different circumstances and in a multitude of different contexts really becomes the holy grail. And I think that sometimes that can be very challenging because it's not fast. A growing season is a long time. Then you wait a year, you get another growing season. Like, these aren't sort of iterations. Like, I've spent, you know, 40 years in the software industry in my tech career before I started doing this. And, you know, those iterations are quicker for the most part. because they can be, because the context of what you're working with is different. In farming, it's quite a different world, and yeah, it's very, the execution is the holy grail.
Yeah. Well, I think that for an innovator, particularly in the crop area, the winter must be to some extent a bit of a lonely time while you're waiting for next spring. And
Yeah.
I've seen that in terms of doing field trials.
Yeah.
You miss the spring and then suddenly you're a whole year out before you can get going again. I do have a couple of comments and questions I'd like to throw out. Actually, my friend Claude Mathieu from Ottawa had an interesting question, and it's about talking the language of your customer.
Yeah.
And they don't expect you to be a farmer, but they do want you to understand their world. So how do you get that knowledge to know the difference between durum wheat and spring wheat and winter wheat? Or, like, you don't want to mistake an ostrich for a chicken, right, John?
Yeah. So that's a great point, and thanks for bringing it up, Claude. So, I talked about engaging with the client, engaging with the farmer. Right? I think before you actually do that, and this is true for any business, right, is you have to develop a customer profile. And you need to spend a lot of time on that, right, before you engage. So yeah, you need to find the basics of what type of chickens or hens they're growing, in my case, whatever. But you really need to dig in to say, okay, what size are they? What are the restraints that they have? Where do they get their funding? How much does it cost? And really dig in. And there's a certain amount of that you can use AI to help you out with, right? Of trying to get the right sort of profile that you can understand how they work. And the thing that I didn't appreciate was their funding cycles of when they need to go get money and when they're going to spend money, right? Because all of a sudden a client that I thought, why don't they just go and buy this? Well, they have to wait until they get their funding coming in 4 months from now, right? So it really establishes a different profile for that person, right? And then I think, and here again, we're blessed because we have AI tools that can help us with these sort of things and preparing the sorts of questions, right? So I learned a fair amount of stuff about poultry before I went and talked to the farmer, right? But when I got in there, I really didn't understand of what happens from the point that when they have chickens and they send them to the slaughterhouse and how they get priced out and how much they lose per chick. So all those little details are really important for understanding that customer and being able to talk to them intelligently. And I think from an entrepreneurship is, don't expect that everything going in, and be humble. Susanne talked about it. Be humble with them, going, look, I don't know all of this, but I want you to help me with it. And I think from an entrepreneurship point of view is finding that first customer who's going to be friendly with you, right? I have my first customer, unfortunately, they live in Vancouver, which is a little bit of a travel for me to go visit with them. But they're very friendly with me. They're very willing. There's certain data that they're not going to give me, but they're very friendly to tell me, this is how it works for me, right? This is when I go buy equipment. This is when I, do these sorts of things. And it allows me to really get to understand that client. And that is so perfect for not only learning the language, but really understanding who the client is and how they buy things. Right?
And I think in hanging around the fertilizer industry for a couple of decades, the one thing I did understand was that how much people appreciate going out to their farm or their facility and just look at, everybody that I know in this space is very proud of what they do, and they love for people to come and learn about it. Yeah. And so I think that's always a kind of a great thing. And And that's very time consuming. And I know people are busy when they're trying to start up, but I think it is time well spent. Susanne, you're nodding vigorously. So.
Yes, no, I completely agree. There is nothing that takes the place of making time. And it really is making time, because it demonstrates that you have a genuine interest and a curiosity and respect for your client. When you make the time to go and stand in the field with them and to fully understand what they're saying, and to really, ask a question and fully listen to the answer, so that you're really understanding the full scope of what they're trying to tell you. I think that those things, it's sometimes like it's easy. I find just in general in the world, everything goes fast and people expect things to go fast. You're rewarded for speed and agility and all these sorts of things. But I've discovered in farming in particular, there's a cadence and there's a way of being that is more comfortable when you're dealing with, with your farm audience. And it comes back to what Claude was saying about speaking their language. I think there's a lot of aspects to speaking the language, the way that you carry yourself, the way that you listen, the way that you speak, and just having that curiosity. So I think it's a complete understanding that you need to develop for your audience. I found at first I brought a very high-tech mentality to how I did things, asked quick questions, quickly moved on to the next thing. And they're looking at me like, what is wrong with this woman? Like, has she had too much coffee? Like, what is wrong with her? And it really took me a little bit of time to step back and to settle into the audience and to settle into the industry that I'm working with now. And it may sound kind of silly, but I mean, it's been profound for me. It's been a privilege and an honor to be part of, farming and the agriculture industry. I, don't pretend to know 1/1,000,000th of what my clients know, but I'm super curious and I learn something new every single week. But I think those are the things that I really resonate with.
Yeah. Yurii, what's your experience in terms of dealing with people that you're in the software engineering world, and you're dealing with a lot of people that aren't software engineers? I mean, how do you speak their language when you're dealing with them as customers?
Well, usually speak a language of technology. So any AgTech startup usually have some sort of a technical person as a founder or co-founder, so we always speak the same language. But the understanding of the insights of the industry you build solution for is crucial, because it's not just another dashboard, not another predictive maintenance solution or whatever it is. It's always have this unique tweak that you need to understand. So combining ag knowledge and technology knowledge, that's kind of a silver bullet when you're trying to build AgTech product. And from our experience at Cultivate, a lot of AgTech startups, they either have one of the founders that comes from an industry, so from poultry, or they are farmer, or they work as an agronomist, etc., or they have someone who would advise them in that role. And that's super important for AgTech startups to have someone who's been in the industry for a significant amount of time and can brief them in on all those kind of cultural stuff, and brief them in on the same language.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up to the end of the time. In fact, we're over, but I'm having a good time, so I'm not going to cut things off. But we can keep our answers shorter. I am going to thank Oda Mengala, Blessing James, for his comment. I think he's in the artificial intelligence area. And thanks for the kudo. We appreciate it, and glad you're getting something out of the conversation today. And then I would pivot to Oleg. Oleg, and examples you learn the hard way. I mean, I think, and that's our final sort of segment as well, not just lessons you learn from the hard way, but if there's one mistake that everyone should not make, that can be there's some mistakes that are set you back, but there are other mistakes that are fatal. So maybe you could just comment on what, if there's one thing to avoid, like the plague, what is that? Susanne, maybe?
Yeah, so I think that perhaps not, it's a couple of things actually, and I know.
Okay, two's okay. Two's okay.
Okay, so not managing your resources is going to be the kiss of death. If you run out of money and funding and resources, like no matter what, you're not going to make it. So, kind of staying on top of that, I think, is critically important. But I think that runs out a lot faster if you're not paying attention to your audience. So I think that, even things like pilots, which we do a lot of, not having a lot of clarity around what your expectations are, like just not being clear, not communicating, not talking to people about, if I can solve these 3 things, will you buy this? If I can prove this to you, will you buy this? As opposed to, this is just a never-ending demonstration and I have no expectations of anything at the end. So that kind of thing. So it's clarity in your communications and really listening to what you're getting back. And the second is managing your resources.
Yeah. How about you, John?
So I'm going to quickly, right. One of them is not really believing your schedules and your numbers, right? Because people kind of put them down on a chart and they all look great. Your costs will be more. It will take you more time to do things, and you will run into stuff that you just totally didn't anticipate. And I'll give a really quick example, right? I had a client in the US, right? Large company. They were looking to buy my product to test it out, right? And they went, great, we'll use our corporate credit card, right? I couldn't accept credit cards. I couldn't accept the credit card from the US. So I started, and it took me 2 weeks to resolve the issue of getting a corporate credit card that I can actually, that they could pay for it, right? So I looked very foolish in front of my client because I'm going, I sold them on the tech, sold them on the stuff, and I couldn't accept their money, right? And everybody was going, oh, just use this. Oh, I tried them all, right? And each one of them had a problem. So really don't get stumped by things, but really think of the details when you're going into it. And that was one of the gotchas for me, right?
Yeah, really, really, really wise that is, I think. Yurii.
For sure, devil in details, but I have one kind of a comment or a hot take. A lot of early stage startup founders that does not prioritize sales. And I'm a strong believer that in order to be successful, you need to start selling before you actually developing your technology. So CEO or a founder or like a main guy in the play should be a face and should be a salesperson at the beginning. He should personally sell it to the bunch of early adopters, and that's one way to make sure people know you, know your face, know your company, and believe in your tech. Because if you believe in your tech, you're going to be the best guy to sell it.
Okay, those are all really good ones. Do you and at the end we usually have what we call a hot take. I mean, is there something that you see on the horizon coming in terms of a change, a policy, a trend, or anything like that you think people should be aware of? Susanne, anything come to mind for that?
I think that the interest and the excitement, especially now with what's going on south of the border, I think now is definitely the time for Canadian entrepreneurship. I think that there is an interest in the industry in general to see what's coming out of Canada. I'm really excited about the growth on the robotics side of things and AI, which often marry together. And I really think now is the time. There's a lot of investment money flowing in that direction and a lot of interest in seeing that be successful. So I'm super excited about, where that's headed.
John, how about you?
I agree with Susanne on all of her points. For me, I think it's if you haven't figured out how AI is going to help your business now, you're behind the curve, right? And I was naive at the beginning, going, "Oh, well, I'll have it figure out a tagline for me," right? But and little simple things that I can copy and paste. But if you're not fully using the power of AI for your business, it's going to be really hard. So you need to get on board and learn about it. And I'm an old codge, right? And I kind of had to figure some stuff out because it just was, I couldn't comprehend that it would be able to do this for me. But I think that's my takeaway, is learn how AI is going to help your business.
So not just a fad then.
No.
Not just a fad.
No.
Yurii.
It's not a hot take. It's like more of a comment, but I think hard time storm is coming in AgTech world. And I think it's going to be harder on early stage startups. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we should stop innovating, because it's the only way forward. And I just want to say, for all the AgTech founders out there, embrace yourself and make sure you have a very long runway and low burn rate.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take a privilege and say that look beyond North America. I think Donald Trump may have done the Canadian economy a favor by getting government and business to look beyond the United States and even Canada as markets. And personally, I see Africa as the undiscovered opportunity. For a whole range of reasons, but I have a special place in my heart for Africa. So take a look at Africa, and that's my hot take.
Awesome. We actually have an innovator on site developing a technology for the Congo. So
all right.
Yeah,
okay.
You're absolutely right, Clyde. Bang on.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Yurii. Did you have a closing comment?
Yeah, thank you for sticking around. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for next episode. It's gonna be somewhere during July. And thank you for all the questions and comments from the chat.
Yeah, thanks a lot, chatsters out there. And Susanne and John, thanks for taking the time. And I think you just gave away a tremendous amount of value to a lot of people. I hope they find a way to use it.
It's been fun.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.